Hello. So for this next round of the concert, Hugh and I will be starting with the Wesendonck Lieder and the Liebestod after the Wesendonck Lieder. And then I will be giving a lecture on the Wesendonck Lieder. I've called this Wagner's Träume. Essentially, Matilda was his dream woman. When I when I decided to do this, there's the part of me that wants all the salacious stuff. So I wanted to go like super scandal, but then I also had to go a little academic on it. So hopefully it's a good mixture of both. But that's what you are prepared for, I'm hoping. Sorry. Translations for the first piece. I am so sorry. Translations. Oh, it didn't change. Oh, it did on the thing. Okay. There we go. Okay.
And you will switch between each song.
And I will be switching between each song. Sorry, I don't have a little clicker. I didn't think far enough ahead.
Thank you.
we might go without slides, if that's okay with you guys.
Oh,
the next. So next will be Isolde's Liebestod. since I'm not using these, okay, and I'll turn it. Okay, so I had some lovely slides that would show some of the musical excerpts I was talking about, but I am so sorry. Yes. Okay, there we go. All right, so we will have to do without them, but since you've heard it now, you can kind of have a context. So Richard Wagner is, all of you know probably about him since you are here or enjoy his music, but he was quite the ladies' man. So that's what this is going to be about, is about a very special lady in his life that led to the Wesendonck Lieder. She collaborated with him on these. So Richard Wagner is one of the most well-known and controversial composers of the 19th century. He composed a plethora of operas, many of which have an element of love in the plot. The women in his life were often inspirational for his works. Though Wagner had many relationships and affairs with women throughout his life, today I will be looking at his relationship with Matilda Wesendonck and that relationship's culmination of the Wesendonck Lieder. Before we talk about Matilda Wesendonck, we need to briefly look at Wagner's first wife, Christine Wilhelmine, also known as Mina Planner. They met in 1834 and eventually married in 1836. The relationship eventually became fraught with turmoil due to Wagner's indiscretions, which started a major period in Wagner's life that was troubled with depression. And we'll get to Matilda in a Wesendonck in a moment, but it's important to note that the relationship between Wagner and Matilda was the final insult to Mina and was the cause of her and Wagner's separation. Eventually, Wagner divorced Mina in 1862, but continued to support her financially until her death in 1866. So let's now take a look at Matilda Wesendonck Lieder, Matilda Wesendonck, sorry. She was born Agnes Luckmeyer in Germany in 1828 and died in Austria in 1902. Agnes Luckmeyer met Otto Wesendonck in 1847, and they were married in 1848. Some background history on Otto Wesendonck, as he was influential in Wagner's financial situation and was also an inspiration for King Mark in Tristan. Otto was a wealthy silk merchant. When Otto married Agnes Luckmeyer, he asked her to adopt the name Matilda, and she agreed. There's some weirdness there. We can, if you want to ask about it later, but I'm going to skip for right now for time purposes. In 1851, Matilda and Otto settled down to build their life together in Zurich. It just so happened around the same time in 1850, Wagner was leaving Weimar and traveling to Zurich to spend his exile. In 1852, the Wesendonck's attended one of Wagner's concerts where he was conducting a Beethoven symphony. He was not in a good position financially at the time when he met the Wesendonck's. In fact, he was in great debt. And Otto quickly took to Wagner and helped clear all his debts and started paying him a monthly stipend. In the beginning of the friendship between these two couples, they were all friends, especially Mina and Matilda. As some scholars have said, they were like long-lost sisters, though that wasn't to last. Though Otto provided financial support to Wagner, it is doubtful that he knew the extent of emotional support he would also require of the Wesendonck, specifically from Matilda. These early years in the couple's friendship and Wagner's budding relationship with Matilda are considered to be some of the most productive years in Wagner's career. The Wesendonck's owned an estate in the Eng suburb of Zurich, and in April 1857, Wagner and Mina moved into a guest cottage on the Wesendonck's estate. Wagner called the estate Grüner Hügel, which means green hill, and famously started calling the guest cottage that he and Mina resided in as the Asel, which means haven or asylum. The year before the Wagners moved into the Osel, Wagner came up with the concert for his great work, Tristan. Stuart Spencer quotes Matilda Wesendonck as saying of Wagner, "The years that he spent in Zurich were a time of self-reflection for Wagner, a time of work and inner mellowing, which cannot be ignored without breaking the thread of his overall development. When he left, he was no longer the man he had been when he arrived." End quote. This self-reflection Matilda speaks of brought forth a productivity in Wagner that had been missing for years. While at the Osel, Wagner wrote the poem for The Ring, composed the music for Das Rheingold, Die Walküre, and the first two acts of Siegfried, wrote the poem for Tristan, and composed composition sketches for it. So quite productive. As mentioned earlier, Mina and Matilda maintained a friendship at the beginning, but unfortunately this friendship did not endure once the Wagners moved into the Osel, and Wagner and Matilda stopped worrying about hiding their feelings. At this point, the affair had been going strong for about 2 years. When the friendship started between Matilda and Wagner, at the time he was working on his Ring cycle, once the feelings between the two of them started to progress, Wagner put aside his work on Siegfried and started working on his new obsession, Tristan. While residing at the Osel, Wagner would spend copious amounts of time with Matilda. During this time, Mina was also dealing with heart problems, and Wagner even sent her away to get medical attention. When Mina recovered and came home, she was a different person and refused to put up with her husband's behavior and infidelity. Otto was also just as jealous about his wife and Wagner as Mina was, but he put up with it because supposedly Matilda made suicide threats. So it was never proven that Wagner and Matilda were sexually involved, but Matilda had cut off relations with her husband during this brief period in her life. Otto was gone on business quite a bit as well during this period, which left the lovers the freedom to meet every morning and spend hours together. Mina was forced to sit downstairs or in an adjoining room and wonder what the two of them were up to. During their private time, Wagner was able to read Matilda his works, teach her Beethoven's symphonies, and teach her about Schopenhauer's philosophy. In 1857, Wagner started the libretto for Tristan. After it was completed, he read it to Matilda. Many scholars say the libretto for Tristan greatly influenced Matilda's poems for the Wesendonck Lieder. A friend of Wagner's recalls, quote, "He used to call in groups of friends to listen patiently as he read through his latest text. The friends dutifully came with the knowledge that they were there not to criticize, but to approve. They were expected to like what they heard and to say so. Well, when Wagner completed the text of that famous music drama about adulterous and uncontrolled passion, Tristan and Isolde, he read it aloud to his wife, his mistress's husband, his future mistress, and his future mistress's husband," end quote. As tensions grew higher between everyone at the Wesendonck estate, Matilda decided she would no longer put up with Mina in the Osel. It seemed as if she wanted Wagner all to herself, but yet she refused to leave her husband and give herself completely and utterly to Wagner. Wagner had made a habit of writing Matilda every morning about his dreams. Unfortunately, one morning, Mina intercepted one of the letters, and due to her jealousy and the influence of her opium usage for her heart issues, she interpreted the letter as to having meant Matilda had snuck into Wagner's room the night before for a wild night of adultery. The letter in question read, quote, "And so it went on all night. By the morning I'd come to my senses and was able to pray to my angel from the very depths of my heart, and this prayer is love. Love. My soul rejoices in this love, which is the wellspring of redemption," end quote. This was the final straw for Mina, and she made a scene of the event, going so far as to write Matilda in a letter, quote, "Before my departure, I must tell you with a bleeding heart that you have succeeded in separating my husband from me after nearly 22 years of marriage. May this noble deed contribute to your peace of mind, to your happiness," end quote. Shady. This led Otto and Matilda to leave their Zurich estate for Italy to escape the situation. Other things had happened in their life as well, such as a loss of a child, so it was a good healing process in many ways for them. Wagner knew of only one way to solve this problem, and that was for him to move out of the Osel as well. Through this tumultuous time, Wagner was still inspired to finish Tristan. He finished it while in Venice, Italy in 1859, though Matilda had cut off contact with him and refused to accept his letters. Wagner continued to write to her in what is known as the Venice Diaries. Musicologist Hans Gall says of some of his entries, quote, "How deeply he had steeped himself in that fantastic passion can be gathered from the daily notes which he wrote in Venice for Matilda." Here is one of those quotes that Hans Gall has used. "Thus you dedicated yourself to death in order to give me life, and thus I received your life, so that now I can leave this world with you, suffer with you, die with you." And Wagner's quote, Hans Gall continues saying, "As an artist, he had a capability which transcends normal understanding to transmit the white heat of his fantasy straight into his work without any cooling off," end quote. Scholars believe the affair between Wagner and Matilda was never consummated, that the passion and feelings they had for each other was just to fuel his writing to finish his great opera. Here's another excerpt from his Venice Diaries, which again shows his burning passion that he is still conjuring for Matilda so as to help him complete Tristan. It's an entry from September 18th, 1859, where he is reminiscing about a year prior. Quote, "I finished a poem of Tristan and brought you the last act. You led me to the chair by the sofa, threw your arms around my neck and cried, 'Now I wish for nothing more.' This day, this hour marked my rebirth. A sweet creature, demure and coy, plunged into a whirlpool of pain and suffering to make this wonderful moment possible and to say to me, 'I love you.' Since that time, there has been no more conflict in me. Perplexity and torment might be our lot, but never, not for a single terrible moment, could my love for you lose its fragrance, even the smallest particle of that fragrance. I always knew with absolute clarity that your love was the supreme thing in my life, and that without it, my existence was a contradiction in terms. Take my thanks, O sweet loving angel," end quote. Matilda, though she would not accept Wagner's letters during this period and sent them back unopened, she was also writing her own letters to Wagner that at the behest of Otto were never sent. Wagner finally completed Tristan, and the relationship between the two was officially over. Wagner believed that Matilda was his first and only love, quote, "They were spiritual partners, soulmates. She offered him something Mina never had, compassion and support. He was her teacher, confidant, and mentor for her poetry. The lack of physical contact between Wagner and Matilda created this constant want between the two of them, and that mystery never went away. It remains in the Wesendonck Lieder. The Wesendonck Lieder are a glimpse into the relationship between Matilda and Wagner. These works are classic examples of romantic art song, and they are the only contribution to Lieder from Wagner during his mature period. Musicologist John Dethridge says about these songs, Wagner was not in the habit of writing Lieder at this stage in his career, which immediately suggests that there must have been a cogent artistic reason for his sudden decision to spend valuable time on them that could have been devoted to Tristan. So Wagner, setting aside his largest work, Tristan, to compose these smaller works, something that he had not really shown much interest in before, speaks to how important this relationship was to him during this period in his life. Köhler reminds us, quote, "No other woman in Wagner's life was ever to be shown this honor," end quote. The poems used for the Wesendonck Lieder were written by Matilda. The poetry pales in comparison to the beautiful music that Wagner composed for it. The fact that Wagner set her poems was quite the compliment to her, as Wagner normally never set anyone else's poetry to music but his own, as Wagner wrote all his own libretti for his operas. Wagner did not write many songs for voice and piano. If you were here for Janice's lecture earlier in the week, she talked about the ones that he did contribute in his early career. He preferred to compose larger works, so needless to say, composing a set of songs was not the first on his list of musical ventures. As soon as Matilda wrote her poems, she presented them to Wagner. He put aside his work on Tristan and set her poems to music. Again, major honor for her. Matilda considered herself a poet and writer. She wrote quite a few works, and her style was influenced by the German greats, such as Goethe and Schiller. She had several published plays and a volume of folk tales and legends. Many scholars would have us believe that Matilda's writing was fleeting and were composed only with Wagner's influence in her life, but actually Matilda wrote throughout her life. In fact, she sent poems to Brahms later in her life, hoping he would set them, and also kind of flirted with him too, but he turned that down. Little side note. On reflection of the pieces and the use of Matilda's poems, Dethridge goes so far as to say that these songs were a reflection of Wagner's narcissism, that his obsession with the love aspect of the relationship was more important than the relationship itself, to the point that he almost erased Matilda from the picture. The erasure of Matilda happened when he published the songs, as her name was not included anywhere in the publication. The songs were originally titled 5 Dilettante Poems. This title was removed by Schott for publication, and the songs were retitled and published as 5 Poems for Woman's Voice, set to music by Richard Wagner. Wagner leaving Matilda's name out as the poet led many to believe that Wagner wrote the text himself, since he did for his operas, and this was not amended until after the 19th century. The Wesendonck Lieder was bought by Franz Schott in 1861. The songs were originally written in this order: Der Engel, Träume, Schmerzen, Stehe still, and Im Treibhaus. Schott wanted to move forward with the publication, and Wagner greatly needed the money, so after going back and forth on the order of the pieces, he finally decided in 1862 to publish them in this order, which was on a slide. So hold on, I took it out of my paper. Let me tell you, since we can't see slides now. I'll come back to it, we'll find it later. Oh, well, of course, the order I just sang them in. Duh, okay. Anyways, moving on. Let's take a general look at the Wesendonck Lieder now. Matilda's poems show Tristan's influence through much of the imagery used, such as day as love's enemy and night as love's friend. In regards to the music, the listener will notice Wagner's use of text painting and his typical thick, luxurious accompaniments that display his beautiful compositional style. Wagner also employs motives throughout the pieces, which is typical of his writing style. So let's take a look at each song specifically. So the first song of the cycle, Der Engel, sets the mood for the rest of the set. He set this poem to music first. This could be because the text in this poem really touched on his feelings for Matilda. The title of the song, meaning the angel, was something that he called Matilda in his diary and letters. In fact, there was a quote earlier where he called her that. In this song, one could argue that Wagner envisions Matilda as his angel. In fact, Wagner later dedicated the first act of Tristan to the angel who has lifted me so high. If we think about it from the narcissistic perspective that many scholars pin to Wagner, we can see him acknowledge himself as the angel. For example, professor and critic Robert Gutmann says, Der Engel celebrated him, Wagner, as an angelic redeemer come to bear the spirit upward. The poem also shows the influence of Schopenhauer. The text gives us an idea that through pain there is liberation. This piece starts in G major and then moves to G minor at measure 13. Not only does he change the key, but he also changes the texture of the accompaniment. Instead of ascending chords, he goes to repeated eighth notes in tonic, while the voice keeps moving up and down. It feels like a soul that is trying to move up but seems to be stuck on earth. The text in this section is talking about a wounded, yearning heart, which gives the idea that this is the moment before the soul can be lifted to another plane by its renunciation. From the moment the song moves to G minor, he launches into multiple key changes and finally returns to G major. The key changes show how Wagner uses chromaticism to heighten the idea of the text. The second song in the cycle, Stehe still, also shows Wagner's gift of setting chromatic music. The song starts in C minor, and throughout the song goes through different key changes constantly, giving the song a feeling of unrest until it reaches a minor key. In this piece, Matilda has created a poeticized version of Schopenhauer's Wheel of Time. The piano part has ascending and descending 16th notes, which give the listener the idea of the whirling wheel and the years that are rushing by. Wagner specialist Erich Schaffe, I think that's how we say it, Schaffe, says, the title of Stehe still is a cry for the wheel to cease, bringing an end to existence itself. At measure 14, the text says, let me be, and then there is the first break in the vocal line, and the piano stops at 16th notes and plays a chord that is held the entire measure except for an appoggiatura on the top note of the chord. This is the first time the idea of Stehe still, stand still, is given to the listener and the singer. The next measure, the voice comes back in, and the piano reconvenes its fast rhythmic motive. At measure 32, Wagner switches the accompaniment to repeated chords, causing a driving yet stagnant feeling. Finally, at measure 69, both the vocal line and the accompaniment settle, and one gets the feeling they are going to finally stand still as the piano ends the song with a long drawn-out C major chord. The third song, Im Treibhaus, was the last song in the set that he set to music. This piece was a musical sketch for the desire music of for the prelude of Act 3 in Tristan, and it is marked as much more in the score. This song was composed around the time that the relationship between Matilda and Wagner was coming to an end. Again, this text has Schopenhauer undertones. It seems the exotic plants yearn for their natural habitats. We can compare this to a free soul yearning for freedom from society's restrictions. It is associated with Schopenhauer's will to life philosophy and writings. Also, the poem alludes to the idea that this earthly form is not really theirs, but that they are waiting to be lifted up to a spiritual level that is of no earthly understanding. Though the music was a sketch for the Act 3 prelude, the text alludes to the love duet in Act 2 between Tristan and Isolde. The beginning of the song is marked langsam und schwer, slowly and heavily, so the accompaniment comes in slowly and it almost has a dragging feeling to it, like being exhausted from the acts of love. The accompaniment is climbing higher and higher and then comes back down, which is reminiscent of a feeling of ecstasy. At measure 14, the accompaniment starts to get thick and ascends, hitting a peak when the voice sings Luft, or air, on a high F at pianissimo. When the music commences again, the vocal line tries to make its way back down. Wagner takes away the accompaniment at measure 34 when the singer sings the most important phrase of the song, we share a fate, a reference to loneliness. Then again, the voice moves up to the thrilling F, but this time it is marked forte and falls on the word Glanze, or splendor. The song closes on the ascending chords from the beginning of the song, again leaving the singer with the thought of ecstasy one last time. The fourth song, Schmerzen, plays with day and night imagery, which is something we see as a theme in Tristan as well. This song shows how Wagner uses his motives to set an idea in a song. The very beginning of the song starts in C minor, and accompaniment consists of descending dotted 8th and 16th notes. The vocal line comes in on the same motive that was set up in the accompaniment, thus creating a sense of urgency. The vocal line and accompaniment are interlocked together on this rhythmic idea. This rhythmic idea creates an image of tears falling. Throughout the song, the vocal line and accompaniment switch back and forth between who has the melody. At measure 8, the vocal line takes the motive while the accompaniment moves to repeated chords. This gives the listener the sensation of tears starting to subside while the singer talks about new splendors and glories. But the tears motive returns to the vocal line and accompaniment at measure 13 as the text speaks about the heaviness of the heart. To end the piece, Wagner settles into a 7-bar cadence, ending in C major, a full circle ending in the parallel major of the original key. It is also important to note that the chord that starts this piece is the same dissonance that opens the introduction of Act 2 of Tristan, again, drawing connections between Wagner's great work and these songs. The final song, Träume, was the second song in the cycle that functioned as a sketch for Tristan. This song was a study for the love duet in Act 2 of Tristan. This was the only song in the entire set that was orchestrated by Wagner. The beginning of Träume is marked pianissimo, I can speak now, and the accompaniment plays repeated eighth note chords. There is a rather long prelude, and the singer finally comes in at measure 17. The poem speaks about dreams of a lover. The word Träume is exclaimed at 3 points during the course of the song. The first time it's sung on a C, and then the second time it's on D flat, with both marked piano and both resolving down. Finally, the third time it falls on an F with a resolution to E flat and a forte dynamic marking. This 2-note motive was first heard in the prelude above the repeated chords. Wagner also returns to a motive that was used in Der Engel and Schmerzen. The motive consists of the dotted 8th note followed by a 16th note, which I referred to as the falling tears motive. Just as the song began with a long prelude, the song closes with a 17-measure postlude. Now that we have analyzed the Wesendonck Lieder, it's important to discuss aspects of Tristan and how these two works tie together and reflect Wagner's life and relationships. As author Ronald Taylor says, the writing of Tristan and Isolde cannot be divorced from the personal drama of the relationship between Wagner and Mathilde Wesendonck. It is important to acknowledge Wagner's habit of seeing himself and the people in his life in the characters he created in his operas. Köhler says, it was always his longed for and at the same time unobtainable bride Sieglinde, Brünnhilde, or Isolde who smiled on him from Mathilde's eyes. Ronald Taylor says the love trio of King Mark, Isolde, and Tristan is how Wagner viewed the relationship between Otto, Mathilde, and himself. As we have discussed, all 5 of the Wesendonck Lieder have similarities and ties to Tristan, especially the 2 songs that Wagner said were studies for the opera. But interestingly, Isolde's final aria, the Liebestod, does not have direct ties to the Wesendonck Lieder. But what they do tie together is a final aria for Isolde, who Wagner viewed as Mathilde. This Liebestod is essentially the consummation of Isolde and Tristan's love that Wagner and Mathilde never had. As mentioned earlier, Im Treibhaus was a sketch for the Act 2 prelude, and the poem itself alluded to the love duet in Act 2. And Wagner's final act was to create the Liebestod as a final completion of the Act 2 love duet. Dethridge says that Isolde's final aria essentially works as a recapitulation. As we wrap this up, I want to turn back to Wagner's feelings for Mathilde. Kapp said, as his muse, she possessed the secret power of setting all the strings of his magic harp in vibration and bringing out the highest revelations of his genius. The Wesendonck Lieder is a standard in the Romantic era repertoire, and it is representative of Wagner's greatest composing, as well as one of the happiest periods in his life. There is no doubt that Mathilde was very influential on Wagner's compositions during the 1850s. Wagner took her mediocre poetry and made them into exquisite music. He heightened the text by setting them to his lush harmonic accompaniments and melodious vocal lines. Through Mathilde's love, Wagner was able to give music lovers an exquisite set of songs that will last throughout the ages. The end. Thank you. Any questions? There was a lot of salacious stuff that unfortunately had to get cut. It's just so sad. Like the fact that her relationship with Wagner, even into his last marriage with Cosima, she always had this feeling about Mathilde. She asked Mathilde to burn the letters, and Mathilde refused and kept them because she was going to print them. And so there was, even into his second marriage, there was always this jealousy of Mathilde throughout, until it was done. Yes?
I always have to wonder how much of that has
Yeah.
I actually always wonder if Matilda actually had more of an influence on his poetry for Tristan than
Yeah.
the other way around.
Oh, yes. These scholars love to put her down.
Yeah.
Yeah, they love to make her seem like she, and that's why I used the word mediocre in that last thing, and I was like, ooh, that's a bad choice, because I don't want to be that woman, but I apparently didn't change that word and was like, eek, that's bad. Yeah, so they love to naysay her. Yes?
So, I have one question because the marital strife in Wagner's and Nina's relationship was assigned to Wagner's infidelities, but in fact it was the infidelity of Nina that started the strife.
Yeah, they were both,
So,
unfaithful.
she fell in love with the actor and eloped with him somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because they had both had a lot of infidelities, and for a while they put up with it with each other, and then there was this breaking point with Matilda that kind of just made everything fall apart.
I have a request.
Yes.
It would be lovely to hear you play maybe a couple measures that illustrated the points that you made
Yeah.
in the lecture.
Yeah.
Because it was really cool, like to hear it, but then I can't really recall.
I know, I'm sorry. There was pictures on the slides. I'm so sorry.
Right. So it's like, when you speak about what the
Like the tears motive. Yeah.
it would be really lovely to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Were there any specific ones you wanted to?
The last one, I'm just wondering about the prelude
The prelude, yeah.
for the last
Yeah.
song. And what you said it was portraying, because I didn't get quite that image.
Mm-hmm.
It's very selfish.
So you're talking about like the resolution, the. Mm-hmm.
Opening Act 3, Tristan. Foreshadowed, prefigured, the earlier piece in Type House. You can hear the kind of the fundamental sort of relationship of a sort of three pulse. You can hear it, but of course here in a different key is exactly those harmonies and strange upward resolutions. And if I play on, there's this kind of evaporating figure, which probably 4 times as slow in Tristan. Is that part of what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about what I just said?
Nope.
No. I've got a couple more.
Yeah.
So, somebody? No. Okay, I'll forget my keys, but this is the beginning of Schmerzen. So what? Number 3 in Wesendonck Lieder. Right, and it goes on. It takes a slightly different direction, but that's exactly the chord. This sort of that begins Act 2 of Tristan. Mm-hmm. Pretty much exactly that gesture, right? And I won't remember the harmony as well, but yeah. Okay, I didn't get it quite right, but it is a very, very comparable gesture. Something I noticed while playing is kind of nothing to do with Tristan or Wesendonck love affairs. Is this also in Schmerzen? Is this thing that suggests the sword motif from the Ring Cycle? So she's just sung Morgen neuer Wart, wie ein stolzer Siegesberg. Sword motif. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think those are the main things that occur to me.
Anything else?
It's an interesting study of triangles, the time.
Yes.
Because then you have the Schumann, Brahms, and Clara, and the Schumann cello concerto, which is all about that.
Yeah.
And this,
And I feel like Wagner's characters, there's always triangles too. I think he really used that a lot in his characters and his relationship building for his.
There are compositional theories of Wagner. The term used by scholars, German scholars, is Bar and Bogen form, each of which, well, the Bogen form is a certain shape of repeated material, sort of an AAB quality. Ben, correct me if I get this wrong. I can't remember which. I don't remember how it all goes. But that's the type of inside the emotion inside the compositional structuring that perhaps corresponds with this sort of triplicative or trio or ménage, situations that seem built into the personality, artistic and personality and personal for Wagner.
Yeah. Yeah, and then yeah.
Yeah, no,
And then
say it.
I'm like, there's so much to say about like the Schopenhauer and the Buddhist, influence as well in all of this too, that I feel like there's so many things that tie into, everything. It's interesting. There's not enough time in the world. Yes.
That was a very interesting talk by Reid.
Thank you.
One thing that occurs to me is it seems as if Matilda was quite a bit younger,
She was.
and I wonder how that may have sort of played into the interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah. There's a lot that I wonder about that too, because as I was saying earlier, when she married Otto and he asked her to take the name Matilda, he was actually married to a Matilda previously, and she died on their honeymoon. So when he married, Agnes Luckmeyer, he asked her to take the name Matilda. His sister's name was also Matilda. So there was this really strange, sick thing with the name Matilda, and there's no history or proof that she had any issue with it, but there's also no proof that she knew about the first wife, but she had to have known. I mean, come on. So yeah, I think she was young and easily persuaded by men, and I mean, let's be real, we've all been in relationships before where I call it the rose-colored glasses. So I would say that there was definitely some rose-colored glasses, but with the loss of her son and with the fallout of Mina and the nasty letter, I think actually that kind of woke her up to her familial responsibilities. And so when they went away to not only grieve the son and get away from the situation at home, I'd say that was a big growing up moment for her. Yeah. Yes?
And it always seems like Wagner is interested in a guy's money. Right. However, there is the other aspect of Wagner, which is him feigning homosexuality, like what he did with Ludwig.
Mm-hmm.
Prince Ludwig, how he created the image, the androgynous image of himself, and got into the powerful man's graces.
So Wagner was smart like that, right? He kind of did something similar with Otto. Otto's brother was a political exile in the United States, and so he played on his political exile status to Otto, which is part of what made him a little more, here's my money. Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, it is the Real Housewives of Wagner. Because we haven't even got to the second wife yet, so,
The real cuckold.
Yeah. So.
I'd like to take just a second to introduce Ben, who asked a question. Ben will be giving a lecture tomorrow at 11. We also have Dr. Sophie Howlett will be lecturing at 10. I hope I've got my hours right, but whatever it says on the, okay, good, I do. So, and then Ben and a number of us will be in a symposium lasting 90 minutes in the course of the afternoon. So this is Ben here. We're delighted to have you with us, Professor Ben.